Hello everyone, welcome to the Old Man and the Read. My name is Jerry. Today I'm going to attempt to discuss the books I've read by Jose Saramago. I've found doing these videos that one of the advantages I have to being an old man is that I've lived long enough to have read a lot of books, but unfortunately the problem or downside to that is that a lot of the books I've read I read so long ago that I really don't remember much about them. Jose Saramago is one of those writers that I read a good deal of his books at least 20 years ago, if not longer, and so I've had to really go through and brush up on what it is I want to say and try to recall what the books were about. But anyway, we'll give it an attempt. Jose Saramago was born in 1922 and died in 2010. He wrote mostly satire. Most of the satire, he was making fun of historical events or institutions or just human nature in all. But and then a lot of his stories are told through allegory. He's just very clever, very imaginative, and wrote some great stories. But he had a steady stream of humor going. He would always have little humorous asides to say while he was going along. But just a fascinating, wonderful writer. He's widely acknowledged as one of the most important writers of our time. And there's a quote, I don't know who did it. I wrote it down once, and basically it says, he narrates his novels as if he were someone both wise and ignorant. And yeah, I think that's so true about his writing. But anyway, I'll go through the books I've read and try to discuss what they were about. His first book that I read, or not that I read, that he published was in 1977, Manual of Painting and Calligraphy. And this is basically a story about a portrait painter who's frustrated with the limits of portraiture, but unfortunately he has to continue just to make a living. The next book is was published in 1978, The Lives of Things, and this is a short story compilation all about objects, basically. One of the stories I really liked in this was The Chair, and that's about a centuries-old chair that collapses under a dictator. And another story that I thought was quite clever was Reflux, and this is about a king who is afraid of death, and so he orders a high wall put around a cemetery. The next book published was in 1980, Raised from the Ground, and this book basically just follows several generations of extremely poor people who have been exploited by the wealthy. The first book that really received a lot of recognition for Saramago was published in 1982, Baltazar and Bolmanda, and this it's the first book he really got recognition for. It's a love story basically between a young soldier and a woman, and this was during the time of the Inquisition, and the construction of the convent of Mafra, a very popular tourist attraction. It also involves a priest who has dreams of inventing a flying machine, basically. In 1984, the year of the death of Ricardo Riaz was published. This follows Ricardo Riaz, who has returned to Lisbon after several years living in Brazil. He was a doctor, but he gave up practicing medicine when he moved back to Portugal, and he basically lives in a hotel and just wanders the streets and reads newspapers. In 1986, the Stone Raft was published, and this is just really an excellent book. It's about the Iberian Peninsula that breaks away and drifts off into the Atlantic, breaks away from Europe, and drifts around. And it's basically, there's a small group of people who explore the new land. Then, in 1989, the history of the Siege of Lisbon was published, and there's two storylines running through this. One follows Raimundo Silva. He's a proofreader who inserts the word "not" in a text. This basically is saying the Crusaders did not aid Portugal in the taking of Lisbon from the Moors. And there's also a love story running between Raimundo and his editor Maria in the book. The next book I have was published in 1991, The Gospel According to Jesus Christ. This is a book that really got Saramago in trouble with the Catholic Church, but it's a reimagining of the life of Jesus, and does away with the virgin birth, and it's just a complete retelling of the entire story of Jesus. In 1995, he published Blindness, and this is about an epidemic of blindness that strikes a city, an unnamed city, and it follows basically a doctor and his wife, and the wife is actually immune from the disease, but the people of the city are being quarantined by the soldiers, but the epidemic keeps spreading, and things deteriorate and chaos takes over in the city. In 1997, All the Names was published, and this follows Jose. He's a low-level clerk in the Central Registry of Births, Marriages, and Deaths. Now, he lives alone in a building right next door to the registry, and it's right next to a side entry into the registry. And he, out of boredom, starts collecting information about famous people, and he finds a card about an unknown woman that he becomes obsessed with, and he is determined to find her. This is probably my favorite of Saramago's book. This came out in 2000, The Cave. And it follows an elderly man, Cipriano, and his daughter and son-in-law. But Cipriano is a potter who it finally finds out, or it sees that he's becoming obsolete because people begin preferring items made from plastic. So he attempts to try to make figurines out of clay for a while, but that he loses interest in. His son-in-law is a security guard at a place called the Center, and this is actually a gigantic complex for the elite that offers every amenity imaginable. And so the family finally decides to move to that complex, the Center, but they soon find out that it's all an illusion, and similar to Plato's cave, thus the name. In the year 2002, The Double was published, and this is about a man who sees an actor in a movie who looks exactly like him, and so he becomes obsessed with him and starts stalking the actor, and eventually he phones and the two meet, and they start comparing themselves and find that they're exact copies just in every way of each other. And so the actor later in the story spends the night with the man's fiancée, and so the man in retaliation spends the night with the actor's wife, and the story progresses from there. In 2004 was Seeing, and this actually takes place in the same country as Blindness, and it has several of the similar or same characters. It includes the doctor and his wife. But in this book, elections are held, and most of the ballots are returned blank, and so the leaders think there's a conspiracy going on. In 2005, A Death with Interruptions was published, and this is about a country where all deaths suddenly stop. People are just elated at first because nobody dies, but eventually they find out that this brings on more problems than it solves. Things are becoming overwhelmed. The Catholic Church is threatened. The infirm are just aging and becoming a burden on society, and so people start crossing the border in order to die. In 2006 is Small Memories, and this is actually an autobiography of Saramago, and it's he's just recalling events and people basically from his youth. Really isn't much of significance. It's just a beautifully told story. In 2008 is The Elephant's Journey, and this is the King of Portugal is going to give Archduke Maximilian an elephant as a wedding gift, and it's basically a story of the elephant and its keeper traveling from Lisbon to Vienna. In 2009, Saramago wrote Cain, And again, this is another retelling of a biblical story. This is retelling of Cain's from Cain's point of view, and it starts out with a very different telling of Adam and Eve. And after Cain kills Abel, he convinces God that God was actually an accomplice to that event, and Cain starts wandering, and it's lots of just retelling of various biblical stories in it. And finally, in 2011, a year after the death of Saramago, Skylight was published, and this is actually a book that was written way back in 1953, but it never got published. And it's basically a story about people living in a shabby apartment building. And those are the books I've read by Saramago. It's not a complete list of what he wrote, but pretty much most of it. So I want to thank you for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on another one. Thanks.